Tonight, the road to recovery. After 4 years in the red, Ford drives its way back to profitability. I'm Katie Couric. Also tonight, new data confirms children need 2 shots of the H1N1 vaccine. And latest test results show the vaccine is safe and effective for pregnant women. Return to Ground Zero, a salute to the Navy's newest warship built with World Trade Center steel. Plus,
fire in the hole.
Steve Hartman risks his hearing in tonight's Assignment America.
Now, you may want to hold your ear.
This is the CBS Evening News with Katie Couric.
Good evening, everyone. It's the kind of news we've waited a long time to hear. 2 industries hit hard by the recession are finally showing signs of rebounding. Today, the government reported construction spending rose by 0.8% in September, powered by the largest jump in home building in more than 6 years. And Ford has made a U-turn, announcing today that it earned a third-quarter profit of nearly $1 billion. National correspondent Dean Reynolds reports on a rare occurrence of late, a Detroit success story.
It's been 51 months since Ford last made money selling cars in this country, so today's numbers were reason for company executives to crow a little.
Consumers are really seeing the value in our products, and we're seeing that in our revenue.
Ford, which avoided the bankruptcies that befell Chrysler and GM, gained market share and made money around the globe. $357 million in North America, $247 million in South America, $193 million in Europe, and $27 million in Asia. All in all, nearly $1 billion in priceless black ink, compared to a $161 million loss in the third quarter of last year.
There's no question that the improvements in quality, the improvements in the product are what is turning Ford around right now.
Ford's worldwide third quarter results were helped by the government's Cash for Clunkers program, during which Ford's Focus and Escape models were among the top sellers. But Ford still has big problems, labor problems. It reached its relative prosperity through, among other things, a rigorous restructuring. Corporate speak for slashing 53,000 jobs and closing 13 plants since 2006. A new contract with Ford, approved by the UAW leadership but including a 6-year no-strike clause, was rejected today by more than 70% of the rank and file. Gary Wolkowitz led the effort to reject it, and his local sure did, by 93%.
I think people are angry and fed up with concessions. We've been up with concessions year after year for the last 5 years, and I think people just got to the point of saying enough is enough. That's it.
But Ford remains bullish on its business. It was only a couple of months ago that they were predicting 2011 will be a break-even year. Today they said 2011 will be a year of what they called solid profitability. Katie?
Dean Reynolds. Dean, thanks very much. Now turning to Afghanistan, where 2 months of political turmoil ground to a messy halt today. The country's election commission declared President Hamid Karzai re-elected, a winner by default after his runoff opponent dropped out. As our national security correspondent David Martin reports, President Obama quickly endorsed the decision, but with serious reservations.
President Obama's phone call to Hamid Karzai was unavoidable. Like him or not, he is the partner the U.S. will have to deal with.
I emphasize that this has to be a point in time in which we begin to write a new chapter based on improved governance.
In other words, root out corruption and serve the people.
He assured me that he understood the importance of this moment. But as I indicated to him, the proof is not going to be in words, it's going to be in deeds.
U.S. soldiers are fighting and dying to support a government that has yet to prove worthy of the name.
If we get a Karzai who governs the next 5 years, essentially as he has governed the last 5 years, what's the outcome?
I think the outcome is likely failure.
Stephen Biddle of the Council on Foreign Relations says the first sign of how Karzai intends to govern will be the people he brings in.
If what we're seeing are former warlords, power brokers in key provinces that he wants or needs politically, that would be a very worrisome sign.
Still faced with the decision whether to send tens of thousands more troops, President Obama is probably asking himself the same question CBS's Mandy Clark put to Abdullah Abdullah, Karzai's lone remaining challenger, who pulled out of the race over the weekend.
does Obama really have a partner here?
I think I will leave it for the United States to judge it, because I think the United States has an experience of dealing with the same partner in the past few years. So this is what it is.
And if it doesn't change, officials say the Afghan people will cast the vote that really counts and side with the Taliban. Katie?
David Martin reporting from the Pentagon tonight. Thank you. Now, the United States went to war in Afghanistan less than a month after the attacks of September 11, 2001. Today, a relic of that terrible day returned to New York City, steel from the ruins of the Twin Towers, now part of the U.S. Navy's newest warship. National correspondent Jim Axelrod has that story.
The brand new USS New York sailed into the city it honors today. The symbolism lost on none of the sailors or Marines on board.
I will never forget what that felt like, standing on the flight deck, coming up the Hudson River, passing right by the Statue of Liberty, paying honor at Ground Zero.
At 684 feet long, costing more than $1 billion, the ship was built in part with 7.5 tons of steel from Ground Zero.
I walked underneath the ship and put my hand on the hull, and every hair on my body stood on end.
The emotional centerpiece of the USS New York is the front of the ship. That's where the 7.5 tons of steel were salvaged from the wreckage of the Twin Towers, melted down, and reforged as the bow. It's a powerful thought for men and women stationed on the New York. From the ashes of the greatest attack against America rises the force to fight back.
It's a way of honoring my cousin. He was in Tower 1. It's hard, but get every day to try to make him proud.
Jeff Parness was there when the ship docked. He knows symbolism, having taken a flag nearly destroyed at Ground Zero to other communities hit by tragedy and having the people there repair it, such as Greensburg, Kansas, decimated by a tornado.
To me, it's sort of the ultimate symbol of we're all in this together, and this is what happens when Americans are determined and help each other recover after disaster.
No one knows more about recovery and transforming tragedy into strength than those who live in New York and are witnessing the new World Trade Center beginning to rise. Another reminder sailed right by today. Jim Axelrod, CBS News, New York.
Now to the fight against the H1N1 flu. The CDC said today about 30 million doses of vaccine have been manufactured, still far short of the 250 million expected to be produced. The virus is now widespread in nearly every state. But Dr. Jennifer Ashton has some encouraging news about the vaccine's effectiveness for two of the most at-risk groups.
As pregnant women continue to line up to get the H1N1 vaccine, government tests released today show how well it can protect them. 21 days after receiving a single dose of the vaccine, 92% of pregnant women had adequate immunity from H1N1.
This should be reassuring news to those women who already have received the vaccine, and it is vital information for those pregnant women who have not yet been vaccinated.
As for children, earlier clinical trials showed those under age 10 were not protected by just one shot. Today, it was confirmed that they need 2 shots. In children aged 6 months to 3 years, 100% had improved immunity after the second shot. In children ages 3 to 9, 94% had immunity after the second dose. Officials hope today's results might comfort anxious parents.
The risk of not getting the vaccine is much greater than the risk of getting it, and the benefit of the vaccine is clear.
In addition to the unprecedented safety monitoring of the H1N1 vaccine, the government has formed an additional committee of independent experts to look at safety data, and that group had their first meeting today, Katie.
And Dr. Ashton, if a child needs 2 doses, can he or she get it during one doctor's visit?
They can't, Katie. For H1N1, the interval has to be 3 weeks apart.
All right. Dr. Jennifer Ashton, thank you so much. And coming up next here on the CBS Evening News, a new way to look at dementia that may very well change the way doctors treat it. Dementia is a disorder that robs people of their memory and ability to think. and it's heartbreaking. More than 5 million Americans are living with it right now, and that's expected to triple by the year 2050. And every year, 500,000 people die from advanced dementia. And yet, Dr. John LaPook tells us doctors haven't viewed it as a deadly disease until now.
Gertrude Buckley was a beauty with brains, one of Milwaukee's first female real estate brokers. But around her 80th birthday, her family began noticing odd behavior.
Her checkbook was a mess. She wrote checks for very much the wrong amount. She completely denied that she had any memory loss. Oh, that's ridiculous, is what she would say.
Buckley is now 93 years old with advanced dementia.
Perfect. I think you would like your hairdo.
A controversial new study finds her illness is as deadly as cancer, and therefore its victims should be offered hospice care to spare them from futile and frightening procedures.
Far too many patients experience distressing symptoms like pain and shortness of breath and receive burdensome interventions of questionable benefit in the final days of life.
Let's try this one.
But how do you know when someone is in the final days of life? Researchers found patients with late-stage dementia, those who speak fewer than 6 words at a time and are completely dependent, lived on average only 16 months, and about 40% were in pain.
How you feeling? You okay? All right. Advanced dementia has the same poor prognosis as terminal cancer, but only about 18% of family members said this had been explained to them by doctors.
Those who understood that advanced dementia is fatal were far less likely to allow extraordinary measures like feeding tubes and emergency room visits.
If you're somebody who doesn't understand who is doing this and why they're doing it, it's going to feel almost like an assault.
Dr. Greg Sachs, author of the editorial Dying from Dementia, watched his own grandmother suffer through aggressive treatments right up until she died. He's among a growing number of doctors who advocate hospice care to comfort patients such as Gertrude Buckley. Covered by Medicare since the 90s, it costs families nothing, but is used in only 1 in 10 patients with advanced dementia.
Certainly, I'm not advocating putting grandma out on an ice floe. People actually have a right to aggressive palliative care. They need somebody who is watching them, who is measuring their symptoms, who is responding to their pain.
Because Buckley left no advanced care instructions, her daughter has been left guessing about her mother's wishes.
I know that she wouldn't want to be in pain. I opted not to do anything that was uncomfortable for her, but just to make sure that she was really well taken care of and comfortable.
Experts stress the goal of hospice for patients with advanced dementia is not to hasten their death. It's to make their last days as comfortable as possible. Katie.
Dr. John LaPook. John, thank you very much. Meanwhile, a scary few minutes today for the passengers and crew of a Delta Airlines jet that ran into some birds after taking off from Phoenix and heading to Salt Lake City. The pilot of the MD-90 jet declared an emergency after 1 or more birds hit the plane, tearing a piece of the aircraft loose just behind the cockpit. The plane returned safely to Phoenix. None of the 132 people on board was hurt. And when we come back, taking the temperature on global warming. Is Congress ready to act? An exclusive interview with Al Gore. There's a battle brewing in the Senate over legislation known as cap and trade. It would impose limits on greenhouse gas emissions, but would allow companies that exceed their cap to buy credits from those who haven't. Senate Republicans want more time to study the idea and plan to boycott a hearing tomorrow. Today, I spoke with someone who knows a bit about Washington politics and the environment, former Vice President Al Gore. He's out with a new book and is on the cover of this week's edition of Newsweek. Here's a portion of my exclusive interview. In the same Newsweek that you graced the cover, Karl Rove writes an essay, and he says that this plan will put the U.S. on a ruinous course. He cites a Congressional Budget Office report that says a 15% CO2 reduction would cost the average American household $1,600 a year. And furthermore, he claims it would shift jobs overseas. Thoughts?
Well, that's the reflexive automatic response that has always been offered whenever we Americans have decided to stop dumping pollution into the water and the air and on the ground. And the point is that, first of all, the estimated cost is a postage stamp a day for the average family. And yet the benefits are not taken into account always. The benefits in the form of millions of good new jobs. Now is the time to make the switch away from undependable, insecure foreign sources of energy and reclaim our own destiny by having American-made renewable energy that's right here, that creates jobs that cannot be outsourced.
In a recent Pew poll, 57% of Americans said there is solid evidence that global temperatures are rising, but that is down from 71% in April of 2008. Why do you think that trend is happening?
Well, first of all, I think that poll is something of a so-called outlier. A solid majority wants to see legislation passed, wants to see this problem solved. There has been a very well-financed, very well-organized campaign by some of the largest carbon polluters to try to sow doubt and to try to use confusion as a means of slowing down the process by which we put restrictions on the amount of global warming pollution that's being put up there.
You write in your book about CEOs saying they would want to be more efficient and save money in the long run for their company, but not if it was going to affect the bottom line for the next quarter.
We are predisposed to short-term thinking, but we also have other capacities, and we've proven it many times in the past. Think about the campaign against smoking. Classic example. At first it didn't succeed, but then it made impressive gains. Seat belts. There are many examples of how organized, persistent campaigns have communicated that message and changed behavior as a result.
To watch my complete interview with Al Gore, you can go to cbsnews.com and click on @Katie Couric. Now, long before the internet, the National Geographic brought the world to armchair explorers, since 1888 to be exact, and now every photo and every word is on sale. The complete National Geographic covers all 120 years of the magazine, including some of the most compelling images in the history of photography and science. Diane Fossey with gorillas in Rwanda, Jane Goodall with chimps in Tanzania, and Louis Leakey unearthing proto-humans in Kenya. All the pictures, articles, and maps now on DVD. And Assignment America is up next. Steve Hartman may ask for hazard pay after this one. And finally tonight, the answer is because he can. So what's the question? For that, we turn to Steve Hartman in tonight's Assignment America.
No other object is shaped quite like it. Unique, yet ubiquitous. For centuries, this was the tool upon which all other tools were made. The common anvil.
How do you feel when you're surrounded by anvils?
I'm happy.
His name is Gay Wilkinson, and although his garage in Farmington, Missouri is lined with old anvils, this story is about a lot more than just a collection.
Can we call it an obsession, or is that...
Well, I think so. I think it is. I think it is, yeah.
About 20 years ago, Gay became captivated by the form. And ever since, whenever he's not at his respiratory therapy job, he's usually right here, carving anvils by the thousands.
And when I die, I can't take them with me, but I desire to have an anvil grave marker.
I'm going to bury him under an anvil.
His wife, Cookie, is remarkably tolerant of his fixation, not just because she puts up with the carvings or because she lets him keep a styrofoam anvil on her roof, but because of what's coming next, easily the most obsessive part of his obsession.
There's nothing like shooting anvils.
Shooting anvils?
Shooting anvils.
What's a shooting anvil?
Shooting an anvil off of another anvil.
Bam! It'll go off.
You'll never be the same after you see this.
And so it was, with more than a tiny bit of trepidation, that I followed Gay to the park and watched, as first he threaded a fuse through one anvil, then packed it with a pound of black powder, then set another anvil on top, and finally told me where to stand.
We're safe here.
Oh, yes.
Your grandson's seen this before.
Yes.
How come he's way back there?
Maybe his mother told him to. I don't know.
One last thing before I'm vaporized. What you're about to witness is not something Gay just invented. In fact, anvil shooting has a long, proud history in America.
Fire in the hole!
No one is quite sure who was the first numbskull to try this, but Gay says it was common practice during the pioneer days. Folks would shoot an anvil as a warning sign or in celebration. Today, of course, hardly anyone even knows what an anvil is, let alone wants to do this to one.
And it's skyward. It's launching something that wasn't intended to be launched. And I think that's the allure.
Whoa!
The men get very excited about it.
Really?
The women kind of laugh.
It is kind of a guy thing.
Where'd the anvil go?
But living for anvils, that's it. That's solely a Gay Wilkinson thing.
So we can do it again if you prefer.
Oh, no, it's good. It's good.
You're good.
Yeah, it's good. Unlike you, I see it once, I'm good with that. Gay and Cookie's daughter got married this weekend. Her present from Dad, an anvil shooting at the ceremony. Just what every bride dreams of.
Wow. Yeah. Good times.
Yeah.
But he's having a good time.
He's having a great time, and he wants you to come out and watch a few of them.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
I'll look forward to that.
Good.
Meanwhile, you have a very moving story
I
for
think
next
so.
week.
It should be a pretty good one. Next week, tragedy tore these high school sweethearts apart. How they got back together 50 years later is an unforgettable love story. And you'll find it right here next Monday night.
Okay, looking forward to it, Steve.
Thank you,
Thanks
Katie.
so much. And that's the CBS Evening News for tonight. I'm Katie Couric. Thanks for watching. Good night.